Welcome back, everyone. I'm really happy and honored that we have now the penultimate panel of the day, and that this panel is filled with amazing people. The panel, here it is in German, the panel in English is called Commons of Tomorrow, Thinking, Living and Working More Openly Together. And as you hear, the panel will be in English. And I will not do a very large introduction, but I want to introduce the people sitting here next to me. Directly on my left is Cornelia Sollfrank. Cornelia is an artist, researcher and writer living in Berlin. And recurring subjects in your aesthetic and academic work in and about digital cultures are artistic infrastructures, new forms of political self-organization, critical authorship, aesthetics of the commons, and techno-feminist practices and theory. As co-founder of the Old Boys Network, you have made a significant contribution to the spread of cyberfeminism in Europe. You're also a pioneer of net art, and since your PhD on art and copyright, you have been active as a researcher in the field of commons. So all of these will probably play a role in the conversation you will be having. And next to you is Laurence Rassel. Laurence is director of ERG, École de Recherche Graphique, École Supérieure des Arts in Brussels. You, Laurence, work as a curator, teacher and organizer, among other things. You studied art in Brussels, I found out. And you began your community life at the Constant organization for 11 years, between 1997 and 2008, and went on to be the director of the Fondation Antoni Taipies in Barcelona between 2008 and 2015, and in that function you joined us, the Medienwerk NRW, in 2015 at our first ever conference at Pakt Sollfrank with the title Under False Flags, and that was kind of at the end of your working for the Fondation Taipies, and I think now there are also ends in sight. So there are several kind of repeating histories here. And I'm very happy that you're here. And maybe as a last thing, Cornelia suggested something that I also say something that you two have in common. For example, you have in common that you both are trained artists in art schools and academies. But you both didn't want to follow the typical path of artists, producing artworks for the art world. But you did explore the potential of the art world for learning, unlearning, critical thinking, awareness, understanding politics, changing the rules, creating spaces for exchange and collaboration. And with this, I will give you the space for exchange. Thank you for coming.
You didn't tell me that. You didn't tell me that. Why?
You don't need to know everything. Now you know. I hope you agree. You nodded, okay?
Sometimes, yes. So, welcome to everyone. I'm sorry, it's an exhibition about the sun, but I have it in my face, so I look like you, like this. But it's not that I'm angry or I'm uncomfortable, but thank you for coming. We do hope that we will have some exchange, because Cornelia and I, we wanted to be of some use and see what we can bring to the conversation, the discussion, and the moment you are living here now in this institution, in your practice, and here now. So we had the impression, and we exchange, as you will see, we exchange a lot. Yes, how can we be useful? Because we had the impression that was the invitation of class to say we have some years of practice, of experience. Some people were not born when we met. So there is something about what we do, or we hope we try to do, or what we experimented, that people come to us, and when I say people, it's people from art organization, art institution, cultural practices, artists, curators, directors comes to us. Maybe there is something in the experience that we can bring. And so what we have planned for now, and I hope class will check the time because we can talk a lot, is to take some of the words that class send us. And one of the first words will be the word commons, because we have that in common, the commons. And some of you were there when part of this project on the commons were initiated by you and Felix Stadler. Maybe we can begin with that? Yes? Yes?
So first of all, thank you to class for inviting us and giving Laurence and myself the opportunity to have a public conversation. Sometimes we have private conversation. I think this is our first public conversation, is it? Doesn't matter. Anyway. So, yeah, the term commons, it was interesting that I was a bit irritated when I got your invitation, because I thought, oh my God, yeah, the commons. I worked with that a long time ago, like 10, 15 years ago. It was really big in the art world. And it followed out of the 2000s discussions around copyright, intellectual property, that people got interested in free resources and sharing platforms and all of this. And out of this, there was a huge interest and a huge hype also in the art world around this term. And we even did a 3-year research project, which I would like to introduce to you quickly. But after we finished that, and we published a beautiful book about this, which I will show you, the discussion went a bit down and other topics appeared. Now everyone is talking about the tech bros of Silicon Valley, about AI and all these things. And there was not much talk about commons recently. So I was taking your invitation as an opportunity to take a moment and say, yes, interesting. Is it still relevant for me? Or how relevant is it? And it was actually interesting because I took it as an opportunity to revisit our research and, you know, the reason why we started it, what we had done. Also, I looked at our book, which came out 5 or 6 years ago, and reread it, and I thought, wow, it's really interesting. Also, in the context of what you were saying, the situation now, it is definitely different than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Things, the problems, the monopolies and what's related to that are so obvious now that a lot of people have this question, what can we do? Where's our agency? And I think within this new interest in possibilities for agency is that I also see your interest in the commons. And so we have both some experience, and I think we start before we talk about the future and the tomorrow, which is of course full of question marks. So this is a screenshot of the website of our research project Creating Commons. We did from 2017 to 2020. 3 people at the Zurich University of the Art, Felix Stalder, Shusha Niederberger and myself. And the idea of the project was to investigate the potential of the term commons within artistic practice and aesthetic theory. We made a selection of 16 projects that produce or maintain resources in the context of digital culture. All projects were run and maintained by artists. We examined the projects against the backdrop of the concept of the commons, which originally comes from economics and social science, but we were also interested how these projects, being art projects, can be conceptualized within aesthetic theory, because obviously they are not at all what you think what a typical classical artwork is. So we started with 2 assumptions to expand, first of all, to expand the notion of the commons into art, because commons there was also a big discourse around it, but the arts never played an important role within the classical commons discourse. And secondly, the other way around, to expand the concept of art towards care the production of social relationships and communal resources. So we had this two-way exchange, expanding the notion of the commons, but also expanding the notion of art and aesthetics. We started with two questions, or with two assumptions, basically. No, with questions. The questions was then exactly what happens when these two fields are overlapping, because usually the researchers stay within their discipline, you know, social science, and then we were transgressing the disciplinary borders in two directions, and it was, of course, is not so easy to grasp. So we also had different researchers working with us from different disciplines who were looking with us from different perspectives into these processes. So, yeah, next. So, as I said, we were choosing 16 projects out of what we knew and our research, what we found interesting for these questions. And we roughly categorized them a little bit into, you know, category libraries, archives, independent institutions, or what they call them often autonomous institutions, educational projects and tools and infrastructure. And of course, these are not really categories in a scientific sense, but they are, for us, they were more like thinking tools or guidelines to look. And of course, many of the projects also had overlapping aspects, as you will see. The next, please. So, of course, I can't go into detail about all the projects, but I wanted to, as an example, introduce to you two of these projects so that we have a bit of a basis of practice for our conversation. So the first project is Monoscope. Does anyone know Monoscope? Yes, some do. Monoscope.org is an online project. It's a wiki and a WordPress blog. It was founded in 2004. It is a repository aggregating, documenting, and mapping cultural goods, artists, and initiatives related to the avant-garde, media arts, theory, and activism. It provides both an exhaustive indexical overview of those fields and also digital access to rare historic finds. Initially, it focused on Eastern and Central Europe. That is also where it originated, in Slovakia, in Bratislava. Its spiritus rector and movens is artist Dusan Barok, who has built the wiki and maintains the site. It is easy to get editor rights and contribute. So if you find something missing, and that's what people usually do when they get onto an archive, they search for their own name, they see if they are there and their texts are there. So if you find something that is missing, you can easily put it there yourself. You just have to do it. And it's really easy. You ask for editor rights, and then you can edit the wiki. So I got the most recent statistics related to Monoscope. It has currently around 7,000 active participants from all over the world. It contains 20,000 uploaded files and altogether 36,000 pages. And I think that's interesting because maybe we will later talk about scale of projects. So to give you an idea of, you know, where we are in terms of scale, it's not a tiny project. It's also been going on for 21 years now, so it has a certain duration and means a certain sustainability. But it's also not a massive project. You know, it's not like the massive pirate libraries and so on that have millions of objects. So it's somewhere in between, and there is still one person identifiable who is kind of really doing a lot related to it. He's not the only content provider, but he is a lot, takes a lot of responsibility when it comes to the infrastructure on which the site is running. So that was first project. This link here is what I didn't say yet. With all, we did not only work about these artists who run this project, but we worked with them. We had workshops. Laurence was also present at one workshop, and we also made extensive interviews with all of them, and we also produce this as research material to go on working. So that's why I showed the website. You'll find all the interviews and all the research material we produced to use and continue research on it. So can I introduce the second, or do you want to intervene at this moment? No, she doesn't. Okay. So the second is Feminist Server, that will speak particularly also to Nate, I think, who moderated the panel before. Yep. Next. Yep. So the Feminist Server is a digital infrastructure as a common project. Beyond the layer of free content and resources, another aspect is infrastructure, and with that come the roles, dependencies, commitment, and a lot of service work. This layer usually remains invisible, at least as long as it functions. Infrastructure tends to disappear behind its functionality. It is the mission of the Feminist Server project to bring attention to the level of digital infrastructure and develop a practice and discourse around it. Do you agree? She is the expert on that. Okay, so the slide you see here is from a workshop that took place at Constant in 2013, so it's quite a while ago. And at this workshop there was also written the Feminist Server Manifesto. It's stating an alternative mode of relating to service, to technology in general, and services, and the relationships to technology articulated through them. The manifesto declares, among other things, a feminist server is a situated technology. It has a sense of context and sees itself as part of an ecology of practices that shows that the feminist servers go further than other activist initiatives for alternative digital infrastructures that particularly aim at independence from commercial interests. Feminist servers take into account the ideological dimension of infrastructure, and that's why it's important, and that's why I choose to talk about it here today, because I think the big problem we have today started with infrastructure, with the monopolization of infrastructure that is now taking over the content that we are going to see. That's why I think infrastructure is more important than ever. So currently there is a transversal network of feminist servers that has members mainly in Europe and Latin America, groups, initiatives as Varia, Lurk, Escape from Graz, ETC, the Eclectic Tech Carnival, FemHack meetings, etc. The related servers are operated and maintained by their users themselves. However, seamless functionality is not their declared goal. The feminist activists want to make the servers a place that can be inhabited, that is a place of shared practice. And I could go on with that forever because it's really interesting and complex what is related to this project, but I think I stop at this point, and maybe, yeah, you can read this yourself. This is some aspects from the server manifesto, and the most important really is to emphasize this notion of service, that we expect, and to interrupt these expectations and to make visible what is actually happening, and take also the liberty as feminist server not to serve at certain points. So I think yeah, I would stop here. Or maybe one remark that will also lead us in the direction of art and aesthetics is, when I was thinking about infrastructure, I knew it's more or less relevant for all commons projects, and I thought, I had this idea it could be connected to Walter Benjamin's notion of production, which we didn't connect earlier, but I think this notion of production, in the sense that aesthetic products alone cannot be transformative if the transformation does not include the means of production and the distribution. And I think that's particularly interesting to revisit this notion of Benjamin also when it comes to the notion of these projects as aesthetic practice. So, but now I have talked a lot.
No, but yes, but not. But it's because it's a perfect that we didn't plan. That I can take a thread from here, because I won't say that this is my past, but as Cornelia said, and also class, I come partly from, as now she outed me as I studied drawing, literally. But then from '97 I was part of Constant, a non-profit organization still based and active in Brussels. At that time it was dealing with what was called in the 20th century new media. But then as Artiv Collective we took it. We took the tools of feminism and open source and free software to question the some of the post-colonial and cultural studies, to question the use and the place of technology in our practice as artists, but also as citizens. And so it's interesting for me to see the Feminist Server Manifesto, because to jump 28 years later, regarding the experience in an art school, I mean, to have a situated technology that runs collaboratively, that embodies care, maintenance, encourage learning and access, this is how we communicate why we use or we encourage to use open source and free software inside the school. So we moved from a technology that I won't name for all the communal, all the infrastructure, free software that we use to communicate with the students, in between us, the administrative, the teachers, the students. We are completely on open source and free software. So using Nextcloud, I mean, everything you can imagine, also PeerTube for the archive. So there is, we use Jitsi, a special Jitsi that is developed for the video conference and so on and so forth. I can give you more example, but that was when I explain, or we explain collectively to students, teachers, why we're doing this, is to increase the pedagogical coefficients of the technology. Meaning that, and recently, it was last week, we had envoys of the government to check how we use the European money that all the education sector in Europe received after the COVID, because we were supposed to increase the digital literacy or to diminish what they call the digital breach, and so we use that money to, one part of it was to organize training for the teachers and the administrative team to shift to open source and free software. Also, we install server inside the school that would be used as, I don't know, in French is bac à sable, so to test different things. And also we developed local collaborations with a non-profit organization called Domaine Public, Tactique. They developed their own cloud also. And I explained to the students that if we are doing this, as I say, it's for the pedagogical coefficient of the practice, that it's part of our job to open the opportunity for people to choose their tools. So what I explained to the you could let the Feminist Manifesto, thank you. What I explained to the people who are controlling what we're doing with money, because when we say about open source and free software, I don't know if that happened to you, but people think we are narrow-minded, that we are propagandists. Is that or nothing? Is that or you're bad? Or is that? And we say, no, we are multilingual. So we want people to be able to choose their language, the operating system, or able to understand, because we can open change, distribute, and read. So to have this possibility. The second thing is about that you know the conditions of work of the people who are maintaining the servers and where it's situated, in which ecological system and so on. So as we know that also all this is costing a lot in terms of energy and environment. But it's difficult in the times we are living not to make people think that we are nationalists, that we want to protect and we want to only to work locally and nationally. So it's the quality of relationship that we create with the tools, but also with the people who are developing the tools and maintaining the server. And also, as director, I have the responsibility to GDPR. So I have to protect the data, and I can't trust those guys. I trust my local grocery. I trust what I can trace as data. So what we have developed is a free and open source environment of work. Doesn't mean that the people inside the computers, I mean, they're all in LibreOffice now, but I mean, we go slowly to an hybrid workspace, but all what it's administrative and collective is on free and open source software because we can guarantee the traceability of the data. And also we encourage, I mean, maybe it's for you it's like normal that in the school it's everyone has a webmail from the school. So to don't mix private and professional and private and teaching and private and learning. So this is what we explain to the students. It's about situated technology. So I can respect privacy and consent, small and specific. So this is really, as I said, it's the quality of the relationship that is important. So this is one thing about open source and open access technology that we can, that I was able to transport somehow from the 90s till now. And it's funny because, of course, we were, people were not so much people, I mean, people doesn't exist. I mean, yes, people exist, but I mean, when we, in the school, we were seen as anarchists, I don't know, whatever, because we were encouraging the use of open source and free software. And then COVID came, and so we were, because of this local history with Constant, in the school and outside the school, next to the school, there were people who were able to work with us to open a space of pedagogy and contact for the COVID. So we developed our own space because we had the resources of friendships, of love, of also work within and just next to us. But then after we follow the development, and so now the recent stuff is PeerTube with the archives of the school. So all the archives of the lectures were moved from Vimeo to that. So yes, we also have a big deal to do with social networks, but the difficulty now is for the students, they don't want us to leave the so-called social networks because there is this visibility there, and that's open another part of our conversation about what we inherit. But am I clear? Yeah, because also data protector officer, she's super great, and she really loves us because we are really deep in the understanding what does it mean, what responsibility it is, and it's only because of this that we can take our responsibility that is not pretending, but what I wanted to say that recently, the last year, some other schools are coming to us and say, how the hell did you do that? And so the last thing I will explain is about the networks and the relations. We had someone embedded in the institution with us during a year because it's easy from top down to say, okay, now everyone changed the software and you have to obey and do it. That doesn't work at all, and this is not what we want to do as an institution and a pedagogical institution. So what we did is, as I said, we invited someone to work with us and see, because the technology is something that, and this Büros, as you say, they give us the free stuff, so we get hooked to that. So we were talking about addiction, really. How do you change what you receive for free? You receive for free, and that's it. And during the COVID, it was high sky. So it's really how, so the person was there, and we had a moment of collective practice to understand the servers, the data, how it works, and also the tools are still developed the moment people use them currently. I will stop there. I don't know if there's something you can pick up.
It's so interesting. I didn't know much of this,
no?
So it's good that we have a conversation. No, I'm surprised that you're talking about the technology. It makes, of course, a lot of sense. Yeah, no following up from this. Yeah. But recently, when we had talked more about how you apply this notion of open source to the institution as a director, and I think that would also be interesting if you'd say a bit more about this, and then we can maybe combine this experience with the other Commons projects.
Okay, yes, because and Klaas mentioned it also here. I don't know why, but people got some colleagues from other institutions are really interested in the idea of open source institution. I don't know. It's because I thought when you invited me about the Commons, this is where I mentioned. I was not trained to be a director. So when it comes... No artist. But they are schooled to become an artist, which is something. But so... Thanks to feminist practice, because when I became a feminist late, it was to understand the structures and the infrastructure of power, of discriminations. And so suddenly I had the impressions that, I'm sorry, I have to confess this, but I was inside the system. Because when you are born, where I come from, nothing is natural, but it makes it as it is natural. Where you stay, how you present it, what you have access to, why not. So it's something, I mean, you are from this century, so so to become a feminist, nothing was taken for granted. So I was able to see a system, and thanks to the cultural post-colonial feminist studies, you develop tools or alliances to meet that structure. So when I work as a director, one thing was to slowly it's like if you cross the door over there, you arrive backstage. And backstage you have the office, the kitchen, you see a bit of mess is normal, but you see all the tools and how the people work together. And so this is what Cornelia mentioned, that we are artists, but we went backstage to see, okay, who is paying, who is present, who is not present, how does it work, why some people are not present, why some people are not visible, because of the money, because of the structure and so on. So you enter backstage and we got lost. Personally, I got lost over there and tried to arrange backstage. So when I became a director, I needed some narratives also, or some tools. So I took from Constant, or when I was in Constant, I took what I could understand and would be understandable, I hope, for other people. So open source and free software, for me, was immediately connected to feminist and other practices to say, okay, the system en français, it's a system of exploitation. So how you can open this, and it's because it's open source and free software. So open source for me, and I take everything literally. So it's really about understanding the system you are, and making understandable for others. So what we do in the school and what I try to do in the Fondation Anthony Tapies, it was to be able to understand and show how the institution works. In terms of the school, it's really about regulation, laws, budget, status. So to take all of this, and when there is a change in the law, make General Assembly, when you teach, you show to others how, why, in which conditions this line in the law change the way you can act, your way you can teach, and your way you can learn. So it's really taking the code of the institution. By the code, I take the law, the regulations, the budget, to open it and to document what is happening. So for example, last year we did an arpentage. I don't know if you know what an arpentage is. It's a practice of reading that was developed yes, by workers in unions, that you take a book. We are 10 people and we tear the book in 10 bits and pieces, and so each one reads part of the book and comment on this. So we did that with the Règlement des études, which is the regulations, the studies regulations, that it's part of it is compulsory by law, and part of it is the interpretation of it. So we distribute in working group with teachers, students, and administrative. Sometimes it's 5%. Don't imagine that it's a revolution. I mean, it can be 10% of the 500 person. Huh? But nevertheless, there are groups of people reading, each group a chapter, and comment on this. What we don't understand, what is needed for the school. Be careful, this is the law, don't touch. So we worked on this, and we have a new version that was published. So it's understandable by the people inside the school, but it's responding to the law. Because what we are doing now is to prepare the fact that I'm leaving. So I will not renew my mandate. And so yesterday I'm really happy, because in the law it's written that the pedagogical project should be written by the Council of Pedagogical Management, le Conseil de Gestion Pédagogique, where you have representatives of teachers, students, and the administration. This never happened in the history of the school, or no schools. It's always the director comes with the pedagogical project. And they did it. So they did it, and there was a General Assembly when they took, as I say, they begin, like this council is 10 persons. Then in the assembly they told me, because I don't take part in any of this, nothing. There were 50 people, so they took the comments and rewrite the project. And from this they will publish the call for the new director. Done. My work is done. So this is what I mean by open source and institution. This is what I mean. It's extra work that is taken place during the teaching time or the art practice time. So are you ready for that? This is the question you have to ask yourself. If not, no dream. Sorry, that's a bit, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. I think when you hear this the first time, it's very overwhelming, and everyone thinks like, whoa, how is it my institution? How could I do things, etc., etc. We're talking about agency. I mean, that has already been brought up several times yesterday in the panels today, again, in the different kinds of agencies. And the question is, we have some examples here. That's why we wanted to start with practice, coming from the practice, because there is agency in where we are, wherever, however small or big it is, we can find out. And the question is how, I mean, what's interesting, what you said, what the last thing you said is about documenting what you have done. This has been said before, you know, in relation to open hardware, I think it was, you know, the even software also. The documentation process that makes clear how is it built and what was, etc., etc. So you do the same thing. So you take from open source software development, apply it to different fields. It seems to be a simple thing, but I don't know if anyone else but you did it before. I don't know. It's interesting. So it can be a model, and or do you think it's a model? So because it's also, that was a question for us also with the projects we were investigating. They are all in the art world, different different structures, platforms, offering resources, etc. We were asking what is the function beyond their actual function. They are a library or something that functions, but they also have or can have like a symbolic function. You know, they can stand for something to look at and to learn from. Do you see this project or your project as a sort of a model, or that where people can derive maybe something for their own agency?
I don't want to say. I mean, it's not a model. I mean, by model you mean it can be. How can I say this? Because it's a school of art, higher education in the French-speaking part of Belgium. So it's not a family, it's not a cooperative, it's not a non-profit organization, it's not a group. I mean, we are not subversive anarchists. We do everything by the law and by the book. And so this is why I think it's sometimes, I guess, in class we'll say, or you or the people, this is interesting to share, because it's not like a model, like an example. It's just to make something tangible about what constitutes an institution. That sometimes we are completely overwhelmed by the power, the violence, as it's not incarnated in the law, in the. So it's, for me, it's a way to give back a bit of agency. To see it's. I mean, when we say it's a system, it can be really overwhelming, but to understand bits and pieces of it. So, because I want. It's difficult to say it's a model, because it's something that you can. I was able to do because I was privileged enough to arrive at director position somehow, and also that inherits the history of an art school that was from the beginning created in the 70s as experimental. And based off the experimentation was the pluridisciplinary. It was a small experiment. So there was something there in their history that could help to support this type of project, in the sense of project of process. Because when I applied for the job, they knew that I was coming from constant non-profitization, free and open source software, and so on and so forth. So there was this meeting on this. So I'm curious to. I don't know how it will go if nobody wants that, and you come with that in the middle of it. I mean, this is the.
Do you mind with, if nobody wants it, like your students or you?
No. If you are inside an institution and you begin to work in this direction, and all the rest of the institution refuse, it doesn't ring a bell, doesn't resonate with what is inside the institution. For me, I was thinking
it's very speculative, no?
Yes.
Usually, everyone wants it. They just don't want the extra work. No?
Yes. But maybe you can connect with other process you're in.
Yeah, I mean, all the projects, also the art school, we are in the art world, in the art system, which is a specific ecosystem. And we were often asked also at the end when we were doing the publication or presenting our book, people ask us, isn't it weird that you're trying to do that in the art system? Because this is, of all fields, the fields which is about genius, about originality, about ego, about envy, about being opaque, like the opposite of being open about how you do things. It's the opposite. You know, you hide how you conceive your things, and you are afraid that people steal your stuff, etc. That's how you're educated at an traditional art school. I was, at least. So that's how it starts, and then you come into the system, and it's all about high individualism, about competition, about earning cultural capital onto your name, and it's all exactly the opposite of what we associate with that. So it's obvious that there is a clash, and for me it was always interesting, or I'm trained as an artist, I identify as an artist, I always say I take the freedom, I call myself an artist, but as an artist I do what I want to do as an artist and what I find relevant as an artist. That freedom I take. But of course then people come and say, it's so interesting what you're doing, it's just not art. And so, or not good art, that's even worse. They say it's bad art. So you develop, or I developed this notion of I have to defend somehow what I'm doing. I have to conceptualize it. I have to fight for it. I wanted to stay in this ecosystem because of different reasons. Because first, I think that there is an enormous symbolic power, which is really powerful, which is totally underused still for certain purposes. That's a long-term interest of mine, to see what can I do as an artist, how can I use aesthetic practices to put things forward that I find relevant at this point of time. The second point is really the question of resources. We talked about that, because there are still resources in the artwork. I mean, there are still, maybe in 10 years there are no more resources in the artwork, we don't know. But it was always my intention to insist in what I'm doing is an art practice, and what I'm doing as an artist researcher is an academic practice that deserves resources, because that's what we need, especially to experiment with this kind of forms that take a lot of resources of time, of negotiation, of finding out together, of experimenting. People don't do that because they don't have the resources to do that. So that was another point. So these 2 points, but you wanted to...
No, because I wanted to ask what are your strategies because you're saying you're using aesthetics as a strategy to be able to have access to the resources to make art, or was also to accompany your art practice with research practice, and to have this?
It's both, and it's sometimes confusing, because we ended up making this book. We called it Aesthetics of the Commons, which is about this two-way exchange, because we did not only want to experiment with new forms of commons or continuing the idea of the commons into the art practice, but for me personally, more than for Felix, it was important to insist also on calling it aesthetics and aesthetic theory. Not because I think that Western liberal aesthetic theory is the best thing, but I think there can be other models. It's just one example which is very narrow. We have a very narrow understanding of aesthetics. And that's why for us it was very difficult to find interesting theoretical positions like the one of Olga Gorionova, who is trained, she has a completely different socialization in Soviet Russia, as she likes to explain. She didn't grow up, her intellect didn't develop on the basis of this highly individual idea that we are taught here in Western philosophy, and that's why she could open this field of aesthetic up and come up with an idea that she calls organizational aesthetics, meaning that it can be an aesthetic conceptualized. It can be conceptualized as an aesthetic practice to build structures, infrastructures, forms, in which then things can emerge and be produced that cannot be produced or emerge elsewhere. So that's for me like, yes, fantastic, finally something talks about it. But it was really difficult for us to find, because a classical aesthetic, philosopher of aesthetics or art historian, they don't touch it because it's associated with not being art or bad art. So it takes a lot of courage also to go into this direction.
Do you want to show more examples? Or?
I don't know. No, not from my. How are we time-wise?
We have 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay,
Oof.
can you see what else is on the slide?
10-15 minutes before the questions, or 10-15 minutes before disappearing?
Further? Wait, go on. Yeah, maybe just a little thing that I put in this little note, because when we were thinking about these projects, I talked before about the potential of the symbolic value that the art projects definitely have, and we tried to, how we characterized our projects. The ones we were working with, we came up with this notion of a dual character, meaning that they have a symbolic, aesthetic value. They represent something, they communicate something beyond their functionality, but they also have a certain operational or functional level. So Monoscope functions as an online public resource and library. It functions. Even if you're absolutely zero interested in art or anything, you can just go there and see what is there. It works. But if you're interested in the meta level, you can see, he's doing this as an artistic practice. What does this mean? How does it expand our notion of aesthetics, etc.? So this helped us a little bit to think about this double character. Yeah, the comments. I don't know if we need to go much into the comments. Maybe, what we didn't talk about was the future, the tomorrow, but maybe we can show some slides from the school. So that's the book. If someone is interested, I have one here. Yeah, we did an exhibition. At the end, we had, of course, again this. Okay, continue. Yeah, that's you.
But I don't know how many times you said 10 minutes before disappearance, or 10 minutes with the questions that we can have?
I think you can talk for 10 minutes and then we do 10 minutes questions.
Because
Okay.
we started late also.
Yeah, you can pass on, because
That's in the school.
that's in the school, and yeah, but there are different things I can talk about this to develop this idea open source and institutions, because what I explained about open source and free software, and you saw it's also about the regulations, but we do the same kind of collective work also on the building. So we work with architects that gather students, teachers as part of the process somehow. But maybe we will finish on something that, as I said, the fact that I've decided not to renew my mandate, so I would have been 10 years in the school. It's also a moment of making inventory, to packing, to project to the future. So this is what we can a bit discuss about the future, and so to imagine what I will be when I grown up. There is some readings that I did recently, and I recommend, but I don't know if it's translated in any other language than French. It's a Gabonese and Congolese sociologist, Joseph Tonda, who wrote Afro Dystopia, to live in someone else's dream. So he took the Deleuze idea that to live in someone else's dreams can be dangerous. And so but that's my personal thinking, that to live in the art world dream can be dangerous, because how Western art history was built, especially the last, I'm not a specialist, I'm not art historian, but I build my own trajectory to escape from my gender, my class, my garden, my factory, and we went backstage. We dig up to really make space for other people than the people who were active and representative and participating to art history. but then, do we really want that? And so, for me, it's a question that I have no answer, because when I think of the future, and you think, is it something what we inherit? So I was lucky that Michelle drive me to here, and she's busy with history and the importance to understand the history of words, events, where we are situated now. And so sometimes I wonder what we inherit to work in an art school, to work in an art institution, to desire this, because there is this desire, the wish for, as Klaus wrote, about positive models, other things, and I say, what is other? What is positive? So this idea of collective practice, inclusive, accessibility, open, but in the art world. So is it in opposites, in confrontation, in paradoxes, in tension? So how much of contradiction, the degree of contradiction, of paradoxes we are able to carry? And if you decide, or sometimes we have no choice to pay the rent, we deal with institution, but we are part of this. So how much are we able to carry as contradiction, paradoxes, not lying, just being conscious of no money is clean, nobody is perfect, everything, and so this is, I don't know, but this is why I'm interested for the moment to enter more into I began a study in that's a lapsus. Humanist and experiential psychotherapy. I'm not saying that we should do a psychotherapy of the art, but but at least to be. Why not? Because yes, because the what we inherit is not coherent with our desire. That we share with a lot of people, and that's important to say that we are not alone, that a lot of people of change. But nevertheless, as you say, we can use the resources. Maybe we can show the other drawing that, and there is another one, no? Another drawing? The limits of institution. These are the drawings that my supervisor was doing all the time to say, okay, you bumps into the limits all the time. There is a contradiction between the values and the action. So he was representing all the time the battle or the tension we're having. So the idea how to stay active, how to use the resources, but they can be poison, they can be intoxicating, but there is, every science fiction or science show that we can survive, but that will transform us, definitely, and transform the practice. But maybe you can speak a bit about the future to finish.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the future, but I think what's interesting is really this notion of what can you do, where can you start, going back to this, and also this, what you talked about, these contradictions. I think that's basically a good starting point, because we all are involved in some way, more or less, in institutional settings. I think the problem starts, one example was I was at a meeting in January, which had the title Inside Out. So the question was, should you be inside the art world or outside the art world? And it was quite interesting, because there was a high-ranking academic, US-American academic director of a big research center in California, who insisted that you have to be outside. And the only place to be is outside. Before, I had said my strategy is to be inside and outside, and consciously negotiate the border, decide when I go in, understand what happens to me when I'm in, and then I leave again and look from outside. And she totally was fighting against this. She insisted that the only right place is to be outside, not understanding where she was herself. You know? So this kind of moralistic positions that tell you where you have to be, and the only right thing is to be. So that's the end. I think you have to, what you say, you have to be aware of where you are, what compromises you make. You always have to make some compromises. Talk about other people that make compromises. I think that's the starting point. This negotiation, and we have this for more than 25 years, that we kind of accompany each other, you know, with our compromises and with what's working and with what's not working and what we're trying to do. So, and that's the only thing I can say about the future, is really to continue that, and maybe more. I've worked more within academic settings in the last year, and I've also left that, and I find myself at the moment in completely different struggles and situations, and maybe that is the next. And one more. Yeah, this one, because I live in Berlin and we are totally affected by the new Christian Democratic government in Berlin, who decides that they have to cut, that the art is not really, or certain aspects of the art, the production, and, you know, all these poor artists that can't afford real studios, we can just get rid of that. We just delete all this funding. So I find myself in this, again, you know, after 10 years doing culture politics in Hamburg, I decided, okay, I'm done with this. It's not really a good terrain to do politics with artists. It comes with a lot of trouble. So I'm back into this now. And I put the QR code, it's still running, this petition. I checked it, I think in the morning it was 90 signatures missing to have 7,000, so please sign the petition. And so it put me in a completely new situation, because there's a lot of people affected of these cuts, and I've been in Berlin for a long time, but I learned completely new people within these struggles, and some are really hopeless, some artists are hopeless forever, but others are really interesting. And I think with these people where there is an understanding of the power that we have, but also of what it means to dedicate time to things and say, okay, like in one meeting we were only women, and one woman said, well, the guys are at home or in the studio painting. But this was kind of telling. You know, we took care of the infrastructure and of the to make sure that we will have studios also in 5 years. Yeah, while the guys are painting, okay, this is telling. Anyway, so this is one battle that will take us into some sort of future with or without studios, but we will form new collaborations. And then the very last thing is also, I have an exhibition going on, and I had the opportunity to organize a workshop as part of the exhibition. And I was thinking about this, what made most sense to me at the moment, and that was also brought up in some discussion yesterday. What shall we protect of what we have? What do we need to take care of? And I said, definitely, one is Wikipedia. Also, who once tried to make a Wikipedia entry, you know, knows it's hell. It's like toxic, it's awful, but still, but it's possible to do something, because there is feminist edit groups out there who collaborate, they do training workshops, and so I'm part of this ecosystem. And I already managed to put some entries into Wikipedia all by myself who were accepted, and so I'm optimistic. So we can change, we can contribute to Wikipedia. And the other workshop is about Mastodon, and maybe if you're interested in that, because we identified one big problem to shift to Mastodon is that a lot of people, they don't know how to find allies on Mastodon. So we do this workshop, and we want to create a tech feminist starter pack, so that people can download the starter pack and they already have like a little community they can meaningful exchange with, and that helps them to get started. So that is my two little contributions to the future at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so we move to you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Are there questions, comments, thoughts? The need to speak. So then I'll start with a, let's see if it turns out to be a comment or a question. First of all, thank you so much for the input. And one of the contexts why I thought a lot about this concept of open source institutions, since you kind of mentioned it 10 years ago at our first meeting, is that in the question of how do we deal with the resources that are distributed to us when we work in institutions and have some kind of possibility to share them or to distribute them. One of the main things I think a lot about is preemptive obedience. So that's vorauseilender Gehorsam auf Deutsch, which is even, I think, sounds even more strange, because there's not only in the art world, in a lot of institutions, there's this notion that probably you are not allowed to do anything different than the person who's been there before, than the person who kind of introduced you to how this job works. Probably you're not allowed to. And then if kind of regulations change and laws change, probably this will affect you. So you probably should just stop doing what you're doing if you have the feeling, the slight feeling that this kind of law has anything to do with you or this regulation. Most of the time it does not. And most of the time you have much more freedom as you imagined, and most of the time the expectations that you think others have about your institution or your role are just not there. You just build them up in your head. And I think this is something that I find so fascinating in this concept of saying we look at the regulations, we go through them. That's also something that, like in the panel before, someone said, well, we look at the terms and conditions. Yes, it's kind of a trope already, but it's and it's a pain in the ass as well. But it helps us to know the context in which we are, and we don't have to do that all for ourselves every time, but it's much more interesting and empowering also to do it together and to do it in other contexts. So that was kind of the statement part, and now I'm thinking of if I have a question part, but maybe Laurence and Cornelia, maybe you also would like to react on just what I put into the room, or someone else would like to ask a question.
But there is someone?
No, but someone is.
I lost. No. To think that you can do something differently, it's true that it's really heavy burden when you arrive in an institution or as responsibility, and the risk you can take. So there is we are not equal when we arrive to a job, because we don't have the same history, we don't have the same practice and experience. So it's not something that should be an injunction to act. But that's why, for me, it's important when you are responsible of an institution, when you arrive, that you have also to be publicly accountable. Or with the unions, I don't know what the system are, but this is really something that it's a heavy burden to be accountable. The thing is true that you're right, and this is what we mentioned about what we inherit as the mythology of, because one of the General Assembly a long time ago, the rumor said that Laurence has no buttocks, and in a General Assembly I say, okay, news, I don't, it's true. Okay, done. move to next, because the way you should act as a director, as an employee, so this is not easy burden to get rid of. So we cannot say to people, you should act differently. But this is also when you arrive, the humility that you arrive at director position to say, I don't know more than you. Maybe I have more experience in terms of years and so on and so forth. So to be able to share the knowledge, this is, but this is why for me now going into psychotherapy or to say, but we have to make alliances in between different people, because some of us are dealing with the politicians, some of us are dealing with the budget, some of us are, so to try to create alliances of different place of knowledge that we could share. So it's not easy to say, it's not do we produce what the former, but this is why it's interesting to really base this doing other things based on the pragmatic reality of the conditions. So to really say, okay, what is this made of? But I know that in some institution, if you ask what is this made of, you represent suddenly a danger. But this is why maybe alliances with the students, alliances with the unions, there might be just someone just to ask what is this made of. But this is, yeah, we can't get rid easily to say, because we are not, yeah, it's a risk, and to see what, but what we are saying collectively, say, it looks like that now, and we don't have much choice, because the attack is really hardcore on the art practices, on the artist. I mean, there is no, we have, collectively, some, and also some of us can take risk for the others, and this is what Cornelia, you were doing with the petition and so on and so forth. So some of us can be visible. So, yeah. But we will be there if you need. Maybe it's the setting that is a bit complicated.
Yes. Okay. So another question or comment now. Otherwise, everyone will still be here in the room. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your contribution.